general circulation under the California statutes, allowing us to carry legal notices such as proposals, bids, contracts, court notices, and all the things that you would find in a daily uh, or other legal publication. And we like to remind people that we do these things because there's a tendency to want to look at a paper of color and put us in a box, put us in a certain corner when we are not only countywide, being online, we're circulated with state legislature, county officials, um, White House, national newspaper entities. We have online media services. We are a subscriber to Associated Press, just as your other daily media. So we have the contractual rights to pull down news as it affects us. And so all of these things make us a newspaper and not a magazine. We are a newspaper that carry articles of interest related to our community, state, local, national, and international. We spend a great deal of time covering the third world and the things happening on the continent of Africa, the businesses and the people. So we are pretty much worldwide in terms of circulation, and we enjoy this, and we want to thank you for those of you who have been donors to the paper, who have stepped forward to help us in these difficult times, as we seek to get back to you and express our thanks and appreciation. And we want you to know that our paper is here to serve everyone in our community. And so we have a diversity of people who use the paper. And we'd like to also put that out there as we go forward. So we're here this evening with Dr. Leonard Thompson. And this evening we're going to be discussing a number of issues. I'm going to be talking to you about the propositions that are on the state ballot. We're going to mention the elections. We're going to talk about the reparations bill. We're going to talk about those things you might want to call in on. And our call-in number, if you're on the computer and you'll see it, is 858-251-6111. 858-251-6111. We're streaming on Facebook, the internet, and Periscope. So you can see us, and as we participate here, we welcome you. You can always go to on your computer if you're not on there. You might be listening on your radio app, your GOD app, but you can reach us on your computer at godradio1.com. So those are the ways of reaching and watching us, and we want to thank you for this opportunity to spend some time with you. Dr. Thompson, you have a word of greeting.
Man, all I have to do is say, I thank God for Jesus, and I thank God that He is allowing us to make it through, and He is watching over us each and every day. Dr. Warren, I tell you, I had to pray last night. It was just the debate literally said to me, there was truly a God, and we were going to need the Lord Jesus Christ to move on our behalf because it was it was horrible.
Well, it wasn't a debate, really. It was a shout match. But I can tell you where I, too, saw this, and we carry a headline, a debate that wasn't. But, when I look at Donald Trump, I think of Nebuchadnezzar in the scripture and how God used him to bring judgment on his people for the things that they didn't do. And in the end, he dealt with Nebuchadnezzar, too.
Hmm.
And so I see God dealing. Donald Trump's been an instrument in the midst of his madness. And I believe that the people, what he did was more harm to himself than us. I salute Vice President Biden for his composure and his vision and his heartfelt concern for the people that he puts out. And I think that the people who support Trump, they're going to support him no matter. If he gets on the air and just screams in hieroglyphics or something, they'll still support him. But I think that number of people who haven't decided and the ones who are standing in line waiting to vote, they realize that the change that has to happen must be imminent. And I also think that even with this Amy Coney Barrett situation,
Hmm.
I don't think that even though Trump can put three judges there, I like that scripture that says that God is in charge and he rules the hearts of men.
Hmm.
And there was another point in our history when the Supreme Court was supposed to do us great harm
Hmm.
back in 1954 before the Brown decision came. And the presiding justice, a man by the name of Carl Vinson in September 53, had a heart attack and died. And put Earl Warren in, who had been a Republican, and he was the last person that they thought would rule the way he did. So God's in charge. And I think as a lawyer, people who know the law, that have any kind of pureness of heart in terms of how important the law is, I don't see them sitting there just rubber stamping this idiot because that's what he wants. The difference between before and now with the Affordable Care Act, code name Obamacare, is the millions of people who now conditions as a result of even not just being exposed but recovering from COVID-19. And so I don't think people are going to spike their faces, but I think he did himself much harm. And I really don't see the purpose of even having another meeting with him because it can't be a debate. He's not going to go by the rules. So, I mean, why engage in such a shouting match?
You know, one of the things that was, I saw a lot of what we call the rules of the game. The rules of the game. I think that a lot of that was broken. I had never seen a sitting president actually attack another president's child, and it was like he went after a recovering addict. He tried to really attack, and I was like saying, I thought those were off grounds. He didn't attack his wife for being a centerfold and taking nude pictures. You know what I'm saying? He didn't attack his daughter or his sons or, you know, all the things he could have attacked. So when are the Republicans going to stand up and say enough's enough?
Well, I think you raised a very important point because while everybody's looking at Trump, you got to know that he couldn't have any power without McConnell and those Republican senators who are silently giving consent. And when you hear the expression silence is violence, that's exactly what we have happening here because they are rubber stamping everything that he does, Barr likewise. And my editorial last week, which talked about the Constitution being trampled under Trump, I shared how 3 people can take down a democracy that's over 200 years old just by engaging in the conspiracy that we've seen between Trump, McConnell, and Barr. And all 3 of them took the same oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, along with those 100 senators. And you would think that it never happened based on their conduct because there is no moral virtue anymore. It's all about what can they get away with. And you know this as a pastor, God oftentimes lets stuff get as bad as it can get, and then he steps in. And I think we're going to see that happen here.
Yeah, one of the things that I was hoping that we would see is each person being able to talk about what they want to do for the country and to better the country. I literally felt like I could just get up and just say anything. I speak 21 languages and I speak them all fluently. You know what I'm saying? I am under 250 and I have the physique that is envied by all men.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And if for Trump, it's like whatever he says, if he says it enough, there comes a point where I believe he really believes what he's saying. And that's what's so scary about this.
Well, Trump is what you call a pathological liar. And that kind of person believes what they say. There was a lady in San Diego many years ago, and I won't call her name, but she could really tell stories like that. And she was the kind of person that if I was standing outside my building looking up and she drove up and she said, what are you doing? I'm saying, I just saw Superman fly over. And she would turn to me and say, he was just at my house. We just had coffee. So, but when you understand and see Trump in the midst of his bullying and his ignorance, he is a mastermind at what he intended to do last night. He did. He intended not to have a discussion of issues. He intended it to break it down and to dominate. It's almost like a fight. You remember we used to see if there was a championship fight, so many times the points went to the guy that just threw the most blows.
Yeah.
It didn't matter whether or not they were blocked or anything. You just got points for blow contact.
Let's say finesse and style point.
Yeah, and that's what he was trying, but he missed it. in such a marvelous way he missed it. It was horrible.
Well, I don't want to be one-sided with this. You know, I can talk about all the debacles that Trump had done, but how do you really think that Joe Biden did? I think that when the question came up about defunding the police, I think that that question was never sent to Donald Trump, really, but it was given to him. And how do you think he handled that?
Well, I think that Vice President Biden handled all the questions well, considering that you go into a debate like that and you got a game plan in terms of how you want to talk, the points you want to make. But at the same time, from a human perspective, if you're being bombarded and distracted, I mean, the one person that I saw that handled this element well was Barack Obama. When what's his name, Mitt Romney, really tried to upset him. I mean, you never saw them get Obama upset. That's why they did that little caricature on the internet, was showing him walking away from the mic, kicking the door. You know, because you never could say you saw him lose his cool. He remained presidential. And so I think Biden was distracted and offended, but he was still mindful when he would stop and speak directly into the camera, that he was speaking to the people, that it was the people that he was there for and not for Trump.
Okay. And so that's one of the things. I think that I would say that the clear winner was Biden last night, only because he was able to keep somewhat of his cool. But I don't feel like he slam dunked it. But he was able, but I don't think he did himself too much harm.
No. And, you know, one of our callers just made an observation, said that Biden doesn't appear strong, but I'll vote, I wouldn't vote for number 45 again. I don't think we can be distracted. Gandhi was not a big man. He was a small man, and he was a weak man in many ways physically because of the impact of all the fasting that he did in bringing India to liberation. But yet he was a strong man. He had a strong spirit. And I don't think we ought to confuse Biden with television. I mean, the man, in terms of his age and his wisdom, anyone who survived 47 years on the Hill, he knows the Senate, he knows the ins and out. 8 years as the vice president, he's been in the room, he's been there for things that Trump won't even see because he hasn't had the same kind of crises. And we need to look at this man from the standpoint of he is our opportunity with the team that he has to restore America. And let's not forget Kamala Harris. She is not a weak person. The sister is qualified in every way, and she has the ability, and she's selected because she has the strength. That's the other part of the team. It's not like Trump and Pence, where Pence is just a bobblehead for whatever Trump says, like that's all that it takes. So I just think we got to realize that we need to vote. If Biden was on his hospital bed and they said he would recover, we need to vote. We can't afford not to.
Well, one of the things I want people to understand, and this I have to be clear about this, because they will say, well, neither one of them really represent us well. But I want to say this. Is there ever one entity that represents us well? We have how many churches in our city? Because not every church can represent us or we want to be tied to. So it's important that we do go to church. It is important that we do have spiritual leadership, but not all of us are going to follow every spiritual leader that comes out. So
because we're there to follow God and not the man.
Exactly.
And here we're looking at the man that's going to lead us according to the Constitution and not his own agenda.
Yeah.
And that's why we have this 200-year-old document that's brought us this far by the grace of God.
Yeah, so I just want to encourage people that, people will say the lesser of two evils, but the thing that I want people to go all the way back is I want people to remember what our economy and what our nation looked like when Barack Obama took over, and gas prices were almost $5. You know, we were in terrible straits. In that 8 years, they brought us all the way back to make us the strong economy that Donald Trump inherited. And see, people have to understand that when you get in office, you have to set policies and laws and procedures, but many times it's like 4 years, 6 years, 8 years before they go into effect. So the things that you're seeing come out of the Trump era right now are things that were done in the Biden Obama era, he's inheriting it.
And they were Biden Obama. And as you speak, you make an observation. You remind me that Bill Clinton, before he took office, because that was another mess following a Republican administration, he had pulled together a team and they were working from the day of the election until the day of the installation. They had things already going. Obama, Clinton, the people that we've had were people who could think, who were educated, and unfortunately, the Republican representatives that we've had in recent time have not been people who were strong. They had strong people behind them. You know, Bush had that strong vice president behind him who really did what needed to be done. But the American people have a right to participate, and that's why Biden is important as Obama was, as important as Clinton. And this is the part of America that led us to the greatness we had, other than the sound bites that we get from Donald Trump.
Two other things I want to ask you, Dr. Warren. What do you think the impact of Donald Trump calling the pandemic the China, just calling China out, blaming everything on China? If China wouldn't have did this, China wasn't doing that. But didn't he just have a great meeting with China, and wasn't he loving on China before?
You have to understand that Donald Trump, the worst thing we can do is give Donald Trump unnecessary discussion to continue to talk about a man who's empty, who says whatever, who spends his time tweeting and watching television, and who refuses to read a security briefing or make a decision, who refuses to say anything about China, about Russia, when we know that now, and let us not forget the debt situation that we see now. You know, the money information has come forward. I mean, Michael Cohen was making the observation that he went to jail for 3 years for misrepresenting $3 million in terms of his taxes. We see so far Trump could be facing $100 million in liability. As Cohen said, he should be facing a century in jail. We saw what they did to Wesley Snipes. He offered to pay him and work out a deal, and they threw him in jail for 3 years. And we've had a local person who ran into some difficulties with business, and they had to go before the IRS, and they ended up doing jail time in terms of the issues that were involved. And so a lot of people have made business mistakes because they don't understand, they're not getting the right advice in terms of who and what they're dealing with.
Exactly.
But this man knew. This is the difference. And there was a report out today that showed that with the attack of the pandemics, the people who have died, quit, or left the IRS, that it's being depleted in terms of its infrastructure, and that the people that they would normally go after in terms of large businesses and people who owe big tax debts in terms of money, that they're not going after them. They're going after the small people at $20,000 or less, because it's easier to audit the little guys and get the money from them than it is to do with the big guys who got the lawyers and the whole thing and can come out like Donald Trump and pay $750. But you know, that Trump misses something, and I hope Americans don't miss this, because a lot of people used to get tricked when the housing boom was going on, and they get with real estate brokers who offer to just fill out a tax return and put down false information for you to hand it in. That's a felony.
Yeah.
It's a felony, and I've seen people go to jail for it, and they're still going to jail for it. You can't lie on a credit card app or anything that you submit to a bank, and the reason is we shouldn't be lying on those documents in the first place.
So my last question is, President Trump made a statement when they asked him to would he denounce the white supremacy movement, and he just immediately started saying, "Well, Joe denounced this and Joe denounced it," but he stopped by saying,
Stand down and stand by.
"Stand down and stand by."
And that kind of message to a military unit means hold your ground. We're going to do something soon, and just wait. Stand down and stand by. And he, even today, he still could not fix his lips to say white supremacists.
Yeah.
Because that's his base, okay? And we saw what happened to his buddy there, who is going to jail on all kinds of fraud charges after having been in the White House with him and gone back out, being kicked off of out of the White House and off of things. I mean, it's just, the country cannot survive with this element of hatred
Hmm.
that exists with these people. And so I think it's important. That's why I said that God uses folks, because if you go back to the Mueller investigation, over 31 people ended up being indicted and going to jail for a whole variety of things.
Hmm.
A lot of issues were exposed, like Flynn's connection to Russia, and it's just the tip of the iceberg of the things going on that we didn't even know about
Hmm.
that could have brought America down without us having had a shot fired at us.
Yeah, and so those are the kind of things that you know. I saw today, and this was one of the things that concerned me. I saw today the stores, the gun stores, are having lines again, and people are buying guns. But the thing that is really not upsetting me, but is concerning to me, is how many people of color now are going out and buying guns and going to the firing ranges. I used to go to the firing range and would just see it would be like me, myself, and I was watching so I wouldn't get hit by friendly fire. Now I go to the firing range and it's like a family reunion. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? What you got? Let's trade. Let's see what we got. And I'm like, there is so much guns and ammunition being bought right now. With the statement that he made, people mentally are thinking that we're preparing for a civil war.
Well, you know what? I don't begrudge us buying guns and ammunition. One of the stories I want to get done real soon is we now have an organization called the National African American Rifle Association,
Hmm.
and the membership has been up by over 50 or 60%. People who don't have guns are sending dollars in to contribute to the organization. Folks are buying weapons and they're going to the range and they're training. And I think that this is a very good thing in terms of being prepared, because the bully element in America has always operated from the standpoint that if the Klan came riding at night with their sheets on, they came to one family, 15, 20 of them strong. They never came to mess with people in terms of getting anything to fight back with them.
Hmm.
And I often remind people that don't know it that there was a time in this country back early '60s, I believe '60s, when we had the Deacons were formed, and the Deacons were a black group that rose up in opposition to the KKK in the South,
Hmm.
and they rode and they shot and they fought back, and it took that kind of activity. And I can remember very vividly, I had a friend in North Carolina, Fayetteville, who was ex-Fort Bragg, who went into business with a white fellow sergeant, and they built a big dry cleaning business, and it was successful. And I don't think he had a fifth grade education. And when the white guy got ready to buy him out, he bought the white guy out, and they had the contract for all of the dry cleaning and laundry for Fort Bragg. And what happened was one night, this white element burned his cleaners to the ground. Okay, and they didn't know that when they bought the gas to burn the cleaners, they bought it from a gas station with a white man, but the white man worked for the black man whose cleaners they burned down. And we rode from D.C. and New York. We rode to Fayetteville, and we carried arms, and we posted guards around his house at night with shotguns and rifles. And when those cars rode by, and they saw these black men out there with guns, they kept on going. So we were there to make a statement. Oh yeah, you come back for him, you're gonna get some of us because we're gonna be here. I think that's what we have to be prepared for. We're not advocating violence, but I don't think that we should stand back and not be prepared to defend ourselves if people come against us. And there's nothing un-American about that, because the Constitution and Declaration speak to your right to keep and bear arms. It's not for a declaration. And so I just think that we have to have wisdom. And I'm proud, I'm glad to hear that we're spending time on the range, because it can't be racist for black people to be on the range learning to shoot, but it's okay for white people to be on the range.
Hmm.
And we know that when Obama got elected president, most of the gun sales in this country went to white females who bum rushed the gun stores, and they had to start rationing ammunition at Walmart and every place that sold stuff because of how they were afraid of this big revolt that's going to take us a black man's in the White House.
Hmm. Yeah, you can always tell somebody who's been at the firing range and got some training because the way they hold their gun and everything. You remember that lady who hopped out of her car and held the mother and her children with pointing guns at them, saying that she felt threatened after the lady bammed on her window after they tried to hit her.
Yeah.
And she pulled that gun out, and she was holding it like, I'm sergeant deputy, and I want to hold you hostage. And I thank God that it ended the way it did, because it could have ended all bad.
Yeah, because we also have that sister in Riverside years ago who was sitting in a car with a gun in her lap, whatever her issues were, and the cops came up and blew her away through the window just because she was sitting there. And then a few months later, we had a white woman up in Escondido who was driving around acting crazy, had a gun on the seat in the car. Nothing was done to shoot her. And then when we take this, the police division across from Montgomery Field, we had a situation a few years ago where a white woman went into that police substation and started shooting, and I think she might have got a bullet in the arm. Okay, so we got a dual standard here. And while we're talking about standards, let's not forget to get back to the Breonna Taylor issue. I mean, because I think that first of all, I'm very proud that Trump and others were able, with the help of that witness, that juror who came forth, to get that judge to issue an order demanding that the tapes from the grand jury be released. Because most people don't know that the grand jury is the one element in this country which it appears the Constitution doesn't apply to, because you are not allowed to take counsel with you when you go in before them. And it's the prosecutor's game all 100%. And it's so sad that Daniel Cameron there, a young black man who sounds so intelligent and so clinically articulate, yet he is as Republican as he can be. He worked for Mitch McConnell. That's to show you how much white folks love him in Kentucky. He won 113 of the 120 counties when he ran for district attorney. And then, while he's talking about the pain of this black mother and about him being a black man, he married this white Kentucky woman just a month or two ago, which added to the fuel on the fire on the black side of the equation in terms of him saying that he was sensitive. And why would this jurisdiction rush to do a $12 million settlement with the family before the grand jury report came out? Maybe they thought that was going to silence them, So the whole thing continues to smell.
Well, and Dr. Warren, with that whole case, and maybe you can help me out with it, because, after hearing everything, I had some questions. I'm still trying to figure out where in the apartment was Breonna Taylor to get hit so many times, but the boyfriend never got hit.
It is very interesting, isn't it? Because if you let them tell it, the description is that she and he were at the end of a hallway. They knocked the door down. Nobody heard the door or heard them holler police except some immigrant who hardly spoke English, who was outside picking up his son. And he's the only one that heard. And if the boyfriend had the gun and fired, which they said he did, hitting the officer in the leg, with all their police training, were they such bad shots that when they shot at him, they shot to the right and all the bullets went to her when they saw that she was a woman standing there, and the search warrant was not for a woman, it was for the man who was the ex-boyfriend. So how is it that you kill her and you miss him, and then the one whose bullet did go through that they thought killed her, he didn't kill her, his bullets went through the wall of this white family, which put them at risk.
Yeah.
And so how is it then that you're going to just identify the one bullet that killed her, but you're not going to identify the other 5 bullets? And if one guy said he fired 6 shots and the other one 10, well, there were 16 shots, and you couldn't hit the boyfriend who fired the one shot into the leg? It smells.
And that's the thing. And there's a part of me that asks, and I'm not accusing the boyfriend, but for her to get hit so many times, I'm like saying, well, did he use her as a shield? Was she in front of him and back? There's just so many things that I want to ask, because the fact that at the end of the day, police panicked and the shot was fired, and then it was like, oh, we under attack. We have to throw out there. But they said they went and tried to get the partner. He comes stumbling out. So if you're outside, a shot has been fired, what's the protocol? Do we rush in this firing at
Well,
anything?
in all of the past lives that I had, one of them was I was an officer in the military police in the Army. And I went through a great deal of training in terms of police procedure. As a matter of fact, there was a point that I was a card carrying member of the NRA and believed in being on the range and understood the importance of it. I don't think he got behind her. I think, first of all, if you think about cops, just like when they killed that woman who was in a house playing games with her nephew, when they approach anything that's black, they already got their guns out and their hands on the trigger. Okay? And so the fact that a shot was fired, it didn't take probably a 9-second for them to turn around and just open up and start shooting. The issue is they couldn't shoot straight. Okay, and the sad part is, I guess because it was her apartment, she didn't know enough when he fired a shot to take cover, because she probably didn't expect that shots were going to be coming back in the barrage of bullets that came back.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's understandable how, but remember, he also had a license to carry a gun.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't, you don't hear anything about that because he had a right to have the gun.
And he only shot once, and he hit his target.
He hit his target. And they shot 16 times and couldn't hit him and killed her.
Yeah. And then my last thing I was saying is that this is something I, as a father and a father of a daughter, I always tell our young people, the relationships that you start can affect you beyond the years you're in that relationship. And I just said, wow, what if she would have never, ever connected with that young man? Could she still be alive today because they wouldn't have been at her apartment looking for him?
Well, I like a parable that I heard once in the ministry. And it was a story of a daughter who came to her father, and he had asked her not to associate with a certain person. And she was just concerned, like, I'm old enough and I got a right, and I don't understand that. So the father got a pair of white gloves and told her daughter to put the gloves on. She put the gloves on, and he told her, now go over to the fireplace and just run your finger across the heart of the fireplace and then come back to me. So she ran over and ran her finger across the heart and came back. He says, now open your hands. She says, now you left the fireplace, but what's on your hand? The set there is on the glove, okay? So you can't touch without being contaminated in terms of what's going to happen, okay? And it's hard to tell people that. And we all as fathers here that it's something about those of us who, really try to raise our kids straight. They seem to gravitate to the wrong side of the tracks anyhow. It's like, I just got to go over there because you said don't go over there. So you have that kind of scenario. But we've gotten to the point today where we just really have to be super cautious and get our young people to understand the difference between what you have a right to do and what is wise to do.
Amen.
And those are two different things.
And don't let people get into your heads. Don't have the attitude that you got to fix everybody.
You can't fix them.
It's not about fixing them. You have to, where they come, they come. And you could work together with something, but when you try to fix it and try to be the healer and everything else, that's God's job.
That's his job. And don't step down in your relationship. Step up.
Amen.
Okay,
Amen.
and that's what the word encourages us to do, step up. And so the word says don't be unequally yoked, and that's exactly what it means. Because if you hanging out with somebody, I don't care how good he looks or how fine she is, if they don't have your beliefs and understanding your moral values, it's just going to be a matter of time that they're going to drag you down. You're not going to drag them up.
And my mama used to always say, if you lie with dogs, you're going to get fleas.
You're going to get something. You ain't going to be...
Well, we're going to take a
Take a
commercial break and then come right back, and we're going to get into these propositions right here
All
on
right.
GODRadio1.com.
Have you been looking for a place to find Sunday school literature and clergy supplies? How about faith-based greeting cards and gift ideas? I encourage you to visit See Christ Bookstore, a locally owned and operated Christian bookstore. You'll find a wide range of faith-based materials, from clothing and music to church furnishings, decor, and so much more. See Christ Bookstore is your one-stop shop, located at 7733 Palm Street, Suite 101 in Lemon Grove, California, 91945. You may purchase in-store or online at www.cchristbooks.com. That's CCHRIST books.com. For more information, call 619-337-7713 or visit the website at cchristbooks.com. May God bless your day.
How far are you willing to drive for savory soul food and Southern hospitality? Join the countless number of satisfied customers who have discovered Jay's Southern Cafe, the hidden jewel in Jacumba, California. Jay's Southern Cafe is widely known for dishing up soul food style cuisine that will make your mouth salivate. Everything from traditional breakfast favorites like omelets, waffles, hotcakes, eggs, and bacon, to lunch favorites like soups and salads, pulled pork, fish, chicken, and hot link sandwiches, including burgers and fries. But real soul food lovers drive from near and far to experience Chef Jay's succulent signature barbecue and scrumptious golden fried fish. Not to mention all the mouth-watering sides like cheesy mac and cheese, barbecue beans, collard greens, potato salad, coleslaw, cornbread, and more. You've got to come and experience Jay's Southern Cafe, located at 44461 Old Highway 80 in Jacumba, California. For a full list of menu items, visit jaysoutherncafe.com or call 619-766-0053. Come dine at Jay's Southern Cafe, where everyone and everything we serve is special. Follow us on Facebook at Jay's Southern Cafe, breakfast, lunch, and barbecue. Or call 619-766-0053. Now you make sure you come and see us. You hear?
Due to the changing regulations of COVID-19 pandemic, please give us a call at 619-766-0053 to confirm our hours and menu for the day.
The San Diego Voice and Viewpoint newspaper is San Diego's oldest and largest African American publication. We bring you news for and about our community. Your stories matter to us. Thank you for allowing us to serve you for nearly 6 decades. Your support enables us to continue to forge ahead, informing you with news tailored to your needs. In addition to subscribing to our weekly publication, consider using Voice and Viewpoint to promote your business and events. Call us at 619-266-2233 or send an email to ads@sdvoice.info for details on how to get started. If you have advertising needs, contact us. Our prices are both fair and reasonable. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Voice and Viewpoint or visit our website at www.sdvoice.info. Remember, a people without a voice cannot be heard.
Welcome back to the Desk of the Editor. We were just talking about those cheesy grits down there at Jay's Southern Cafe. I want to let you know he has a tremendously wonderful menu. But if breakfast, lunch, dinner, if you get those cheesy grits, anything else you get after the cheesy grits, you're going to be blessed. But them cheesy grits, this Lord Jesus, get me excited already about it.
Yeah, Dr. Thompson, I was watching you eat them, and you were speaking in tongues. They were so good.
Man, there was a special anointing, and Chef Jay, the bishop, he's not only a pastor, but he is a trained culinary chef. Ooh. And so the way he does his food and the presentation is just amazing. And you go down there, and it's just really just a family-owned business. And you know how we love family-owned businesses. Yes. So, Dr. Warren, I want to get into these propositions because people get your pen and paper out because we're gonna have a discussion. And we're going to ask questions, and we're going to try to answer the questions as we go through the propositions. And I know you wanted to do a shout-out to the governor and Dr. Weber right quick, too.
Yeah, I want to start off with that because Dr. Weber's reparation bill for African Americans was signed today by the governor. This is the first state in the union to sign a reparations bill concerning African Americans. And while I haven't read all the details of it, I know it's supposed to affect those of the descendants of slaves, and I don't know if it's going to be restricted to people who were in California directly as the descendants or how, but the important thing is that it's a milestone, and it's a very interesting time that we're living in when at the same time that we have this happening, governor came forth in Alabama, I believe it was, and apologized for the murder of the 4 girls in the church. Like how many years has it been for someone to really speak up? And they tried, folks, and they got off and they got away, and all kinds of things that have happened to us. And so maybe it's the mandate that John Lewis left us to get into good trouble, and people are beginning to be sensitized. And I want to salute the the white Americans, this whole generation who is not hiding behind the sins of their forefathers, but who are brave enough to step up and demand equality and justice for everyone based on the idea of what's right. And they represent the future of this country where we have a heart for one another, because there's certainly, it might be Black Lives Matter and the protests and more black people being killed than anyone else, but there are more whites out there marching than blacks in every city. And so people understand that they're not saved by their color, because everybody can be a victim of these insane people. So Dr. Weber, representing our area in the State Assembly, also this year's chairperson of the Legislative Black Caucus in the Assembly. And I can tell you from the time that I was one of the 10 honorees in the state before the legislature doing Martin Luther King event several years ago, that when Dr. Weber speaks on the floor, it's with the power and the strength of, I guess, Frederick Douglass giving a statement, because people listen. And she's a very effective spokesperson who does her homework. We're proud of the job that she's doing. And then we have to do our part. Let's start by voting, registering to vote, getting involved, getting into good trouble. And so as that lead in, I have something to say about the propositions that are on the ballot. And some people will have been kind of waiting to hear this. These are the state propositions. I'm deal with the city ballot measures and propositions next week, but I want to deal quickly with these state propositions. And so one of the first ones there is proposition number 14. And proposition 14 is a bond issue that would bring $5.5 billion in bonds. And it says, it's got a little teaser caveat in there, because it says that $1.5 billion that would be for research and therapy for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Stopes, epilepsies, and other brain and central nervous system diseases and conditions. But that still leaves $3.5 billion out there, and I don't think we're in a position to incur any kind of tax raise increases, even in terms of bonds at this point, with all that we're going through, losses of jobs, housing, eviction moratorium. So I think that Proposition 14, even though it limits, got some limits into it, I don't think that we should be supporting Proposition 14. And Proposition 15 is another.
So you're saying no on 14?
No on 14.
Okay.
And those who got questions about it and want to argue it, we always entertain. But what we're doing is offering recommendations. So we're not trying to tell people how to vote. We're just trying to give you some insight that you might not have otherwise in terms of voting. Now, this next one is interesting, Proposition 15, and it amends Proposition 13. That was in 1978 when we had 13 put a limit on property taxes. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that, okay, they say they're going to increase funding for public schools, community colleges, and local government. But the big thing here says that it's going to tax commercial and industrial properties based on market value. And so that's not necessarily helping the little people. And this idea of more tax money, and you're saying you're going to give it to schools, I think that's the teaser. So I think that I would recommend a no vote on Proposition 15 as well.
Because Proposition 15 will be changing Proposition 13.
Well,
and Proposition
it says
13
that it would limit, it would switch some of that burden to
Businesses.
commercial, industrial properties based on market value. Okay, and so that might be so. But I think that anytime we're talking about taxing, we need to have a more detailed study, because taxes are never that simple, and most of us never get into it.
And also the thing about it is that if they tax the commercial property, that then cost is going to be put into the commercial small businesses.
And they're going to push it. They're just going to pass it on.
Yeah, and that means that it will put some people out of business.
It will.
And our prices will be going up.
And that's an important thing. So now Proposition 16, we all should know about and be aware of, because it repeals Prop 209, which in 1996 was the one that they used to come after us in terms of prohibiting the state from discriminating against or granting preferential treatment to any individual or group based on race, sex, color, ethnicity. That was the whole thing that was used to cancel affirmative action. and we took a hit in terms of losing a lot of business opportunities. The argument that seats were being made available in schools was just because of people's color was not so, but it was to try to bring some equity. So we all want to support Proposition 16, no matter what they say.
And so that's yes.
That's a yes. And then Proposition 17 is important too, because Proposition 17 is a yes. And what does 17 do? It restores voting rights of people on parole upon completion of their prison term. Now, this is very important because people who have served their time that are not on parole, they can vote. But if you're on parole, you can't vote. And so we want to make sure that people on parole and who have completed their prison term and on parole following their prison term, like they had to serve so many years and then you got so many years of parole, then that they can still vote.
Well, but there's even something more to that, because sometimes you don't go in, but you still get parole.
Yes.
And if you get parole, never went to jail, but you got parole, you still can't vote.
And so this is to make sure that
exactly.
you can. Okay, and so it's yes on Proposition 17, Proposition 18 in terms of voting rights, age 18. There's a yes on Proposition 18.
So what's the voting rights?
The voting rights, I believe, as I remember it affected the rights, the age at which young people could vote.
Okay.
And so we want to be in favor of whatever is going to give them the right to come to the ballot box right now with all of the things that we see. Let's not forget what happened with the shooting in Florida and how those kids got together and went around the nation mobilizing people, even though they weren't old enough to vote.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing that we have happening here is I understand in America right now that every 30 seconds, a Latino in this country who is born in this country reaches 18 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
So that voting block, the strength is going to be up for that particular group by all means. And now Proposition 19 is a very important proposition. It's called home protection.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have under Proposition 19 is that it would allow people at 55 and older who are severely disabled or victims of wildfires or other disasters to keep lower property tax rates when they move to new homes. So if you had a house that was burnt down in one of these fires that's going on here, and you had to rebuild, or you found a new place that you moved to that was already built, if you didn't have this in place, you would be paying property tax based on the value of that new place at the market value of it at the point of your moving in to occupy it based on when it was constructed.
Yeah. Or your rebuild.
Or your
on
rebuild.
Your same property.
On your rebuild on the same property. But if you had been on your property for years and you had a lower tax rate and it burned down, if you rebuilt, well, under Proposition 19, home protection, you would be able to keep the old property rate in the new building.
So you're saying yes
on Proposition 19. Definitely a yes on 19. Now, Proposition 20 gets to be a little tricky because Proposition 20 carries a title of crime, but what it does is, you might remember that a few years ago, we had Propositions 47 and 57, and these were propositions that changed a number of felonies to misdemeanors and also helped result in getting people out of jail, because the California prison system has been under a federal mandate to reduce the number of folks in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there was a movement to shift people back to the state and to the counties and to get them out of the state prisons.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens here is they want to go back and take some of the things that were made misdemeanors under the Prop 47 and 57, and they want to reclassify them as criminal penalties. And so the DA's office on Black Men and Women United the other day was trying to give us an example of a person, say, who I guess it might have been a domestic violence, whatever the case was, that a person did something and it was so clear that and blatant that this person was going to continue, that they would now be able to reclassify them as a felony. And I'm concerned about that because we don't see all of the things that were already made felonies that put more black people in jail disproportionate to whites or other folks. And so I believe that on Proposition 20, we should be voting no.
Okay.
Because let's not think that it's a friend of ours. And so what it says, one of the things it says it will do is it will restrict parole for nonviolent offenders and authorize felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors. That's too general. That's too general. And when we know that when it comes to the law, if we're not specific, we get the worst end of the deal, all right?
Yeah.
So I got three more here to wrap this up because I know that that time is of the essence as we're going. Proposition 21 deals with rent control, okay? And this, we had, in the last election cycle, we had Proposition 10, which was also a rent control bill. And that bill brought certain residences under rent control that had not been before. And so the people who were in opposition to Proposition 10 raised and spent some $30 million to get it defeated, while those who were in favor of rent control only spent about $12 million and they lost. And so many of the black realtors that are brokers have automatically are in opposition to rent control. But what I shared with them in Sacramento with the last bill was that if you go back to what happened with the housing bubble collapsing, we had a situation where people lost their homes and investors bought those homes by the tons. And they turned around and rented them back to the people who lost them, and they rented them in many instances for more than the mortgage was. But because people had become used to a certain standard, they were willing to pay that if they could live like they did when they owned their homes. And so rent control was intended to do that. And so in this one, it says that it would allow local governments to establish rent control on housing over 15 years old, and with an exception for landlords who own no more than 2 homes. And that goes after those investors, because I know in the state of Tennessee, at one point, the investors bought so many homes that the legislature had to step in and put a freeze on it so that first-time homeowners would have a chance to buy. And we know what happened in Vegas, that the whole place just went on the market, and so people own more than 2 homes. And so we want to recommend yes on Prop 21 for rent control. Prop 22 and 23, they are the ones that are really generating the money for what you're seeing on television these days, okay? Prop 22 is listed as employment. And what it does is Prop 22 overturns AB 5. And AB 5 was offered and adopted and signed coming from Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez. And what it said in effect was that Lyft and Uber and DoorDash drivers would have to be classified as employees and could no longer be independent contractors. And this was as a result of the Dianetic court case that came out in LA about 3 years ago involving this whole issue of independent contractors versus employees. And we've seen that, especially in this pandemic and with so many people having to work part-time, that many people are staying afloat because they're able to drive Uber or Lyft or one of these other things. This also would affect newspapers, community papers, because they would no longer want us to have writers and photographers and distributors that were independent contractors. And so since this was signed last year, before all the pandemic came about, there have been about 3 different trips back to the governor adding exemptions in terms of certain classes. Newspapers, we got a freeze for 12 months while things that'll be worked out. So I would say that we should vote for Proposition 22, which will negate and overturn AB 5 and go back to allowing independent drivers to be independent, and it would cancel making them employees.
Okay, so help me out because I was a little confused because I've been watching the spin pieces on the news,
Right.
and they were saying vote yes on Proposition 22. It will give the drivers health care and benefits.
No. That's not what the yes vote on it, and they might throw some health care out there, but the important thing is that Proposition 22 allows them to remain independent contractors as opposed to making them employees. And most people, all of these independent small businesses that have these people working as contractors, many of them would go out of business because they couldn't afford to pay the 941 taxes and all the state taxes that go along to an employee for somebody working part-time.
Exactly.
Okay, and so that's why, especially in the pandemic when we've had the highest unemployment in I don't know when, people still right now, EDD is shut down because they're changing a system and people without checks aren't getting any money. So no, it needs to be a yes vote on 22. Finally, 23. 23 is probably the most deceptive of all of the propositions that are being advertised. If you watch television, you see a lady in a wheelchair almost who's talking about how she's on dialysis, and if 23 is not defeated, that she would lose her dialysis cover, and she didn't want to die because she couldn't get dialysis because you passed this proposition. And so they're urging people to vote no. But let's look at 23. 23, the opposition to 23 is being financed by the dialysis clinics. They're the ones who put up all the money. And let's just look at what 23 does. It would require kidney dialysis clinics to have at least one licensed physician on site. So now that's a benefit for the people. The clinics would only be exempt from this requirement if there was a shortage of licensed physicians. So there was a process they had to go to if they were going to be exempt. It would also require state approval for clinic closures or service reductions. Right now, they can shut down, close, and do whatever they want, and there's nothing that anybody can say. So that brings in some supervision. And then the dialysis clinics would be required to report infection data in terms of what's happening. All of those things are going to be helpful to people. And finally, it would prohibit the clinics from discriminating against clients based on payment source, because people who need dialysis, that's life and death. And they can cherry pick and say, well, we don't like who you got for insurance, so we're not going to accept you.
Exactly.
And so for this reason, Prop 23 should vote yes. In spite of them wanting you to vote no, it should be a yes vote on it, okay?
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Now, are these coming out in the Voice and Viewpoint?
Yes, this
Okay.
is in this week's Voice and Viewpoint.
Okay.
I'm going to skip over the privacy one to Prop 25, the bail system, because this is the last one that's really tricky. Now, it says Prop 25 will replace the state's money bail system with a system based on public safety risk, and it would limit pretrial detention for most misdemeanors. Let me show you the trickiness of the bail industry. Over a year ago, this whole issue went to court after the bail risk system passed as a proposition. And so the bail bonds people went to court to challenge it. The court upheld the proposition that put the risk in place. The bail risk system meant that the judge could look at the individual, the crime in the case, and decide what the bail would be, and no longer would you have to put up your house and everything else to get Johnny or Mary or Billy out of jail while you're waiting for a trial. What the bail people did was the courts ruled on the case and made the ruling stay for a whole year to give it up to this time to be on the ballot in a proposition. So the bail bond people went and created this proposition that says that if you vote for this, you in effect will replace the state's money bail system with a system based on public safety. Well, they already have a system based on public safety. But what they're counting on is that if people don't pass this, this is tricky. If people don't pass this here, then that system would stay in place. If you pass this, they're going to see themselves going back to the money. And so if the rule you have to look at it is the bail bond people are the one putting this proposition up, then it benefits them and it doesn't benefit the people who are supposed to. So we'll be able to talk about it more. It's more involved in that, but at least I got you started on the important ones that you need to look at in terms of these propositions because they're important. Most of the time, some of them will probably advertise some with our papers and with you, as I understand here on the station. They're going to be putting some commercials together. But we don't want you to go by the commercials because they're running with us. We want you to go by being informed, look at the recommendations, the questions, and what we put out. If you got a question, send a question, and we'll be happy to look at a question. If we find that we've missed something here, because we're not as smart as we might think we are, we'll be more than happy to go back and reconsider and discuss and look at. There's also the Office of Legislative Analysis out of Sacramento, and that office produces a booklet that does the pros and cons of all of these propositions. So you got time to read those things. The important thing is take your voting seriously beyond the individuals that are on the ballot. And remember that based on where you are, the presidential ballots will be the same, but your assembly people will be different, and some of your state positions will be different. And so we got to look at that in terms of looking at it very closely.
Well, Dr. Warren, believe it or not, our
Whew.
time is done and over. This has been From the Desk of the Editor. We look forward to seeing you all next week. We got more propositions, more things on the ballot to talk about. And until then,